Hey guys, welcome back to the pod. It's the week 8 recap, week 9 preview. Same format for you guys that have watched before. If you haven't watched before, we basically recap last week's games, give out some general winners and losers of the week, some bets that we had that won or lost, and then we will preview the upcoming ranked versus ranked opponents for this week. So let's get right into last week's games that we previewed. Michigan State. And I think for probably three of these four, maybe all of them, they're going to go pretty quick as far as the recap. Michigan absolutely owned Michigan State. The metrics said that might be how it goes. We had some thoughts about, as far as D'Antonio possibly doing what he does against them, maybe keeping it closer within the number, point off the win. But Michigan State this year, we've talked about this quite a few times as far as their inability to run the football, their inability to stop the pass. But in this game, Michigan actually did run the football on them. So maybe Michigan State's, maybe their rush defense, maybe their stats were a little bit padded from like lesser opponents. But Michigan State's clearly not a very good football team this year. Do you think? I mean, was your takeaway from this game is Michigan just are they that good, or is Michigan State just not good, and Michigan just kind of got by in this game? Like, how do you think that was?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Funny thing is, with how dominant Michigan was statistically and on the field, they were only one score away from a push for Michigan State. I know I was on Michigan State.
Right.
What has burned me twice on Michigan this year has been the weather, where apparently Harbaugh or someone high up enough can say, "Hey, we're not playing until the rain is completely stopped."
Right.
I know there was some lightning around the area this week, but a couple weeks ago it was just like heavy rain, so they decided.
Which is absurd.
Yeah, so I guess in 2018 everybody's snowflake soft and can just say, "Hey, we're not going to play in the weather and the elements."
Yeah.
Lightning's a different story,
Mhm.
but so that was kind of something I was actually relying on to kind of slow down Michigan, which Michigan State did a pretty good job of anyway. But like you said, they were statistically dominant in pretty much all facets of the game. But you were still only one play away from having Sparty be a cover pretty much. So
right.
I think Michigan going forward still has all the chips pretty much in front of them in terms of getting into the playoff. They've got essential bye weeks. Going from actually they are on an actual bye this week, and then they host Penn State, and then two easy games: Rutgers, Indiana, and then the showdown with Ohio State, which I think we all agree they look much better than Ohio State at this point in the year.
Yeah.
So they're going to be favored in all the games. Or actually, I think Ohio State might be a slight favorite.
It's in Columbus. I think Ohio State is going to be
like a 2-point favorite.
Right.
So, but Michigan has everything in front of them in terms of getting to the playoff itself. But Sparty, just a down year. Not a terrible team, and definitely, a trap game for a lot of teams just with the style of, football they play. But it'll be interesting to see how Michigan goes forward from there.
Yeah, so moving on to the next game, Clemson and North Carolina State. Game certainly that I think the betting public seemed to really like NC State. I know this pod was pretty heavy on them. David from New Orleans was actually on Clemson and called a huge Clemson win, so props to him. But I was interested to see, I think we all were, if NC State was for real at all. How would Trevor Lawrence look coming off the bye with, a whole another week of reps under his belt with Kelly Bryant being gone? And, Clemson was for sure the dominant team in this game. They, yards per play, I think they had a little bit more. They definitely had more total yards, way more efficient on third down. NC State, they turned the ball over 3 times. They were very, I think, inefficient as far as being able to run the ball, keep some balance in that game. And overall, I think we saw what we were expecting from Clemson in the beginning of the year, a team that's maybe starting to hit their stride, and that could be a team that, is this going to be like it's been the last few years. We just talking Bama Clemson again potentially. But what were your takeaways from the game? Is how do you feel about Clemson?
Yeah, so NC State frauds.
Yeah.
Exposed tremendously. I think just out of principle, we had to take the number at 17 and a half.
Yeah.
With what you were getting there with North Carolina State, with a team that you had an experienced quarterback and a pretty sound defense, or at least so we thought.
Right.
I think it says a little bit more about Clemson, though, in the outcome where they did reassert themselves as a dominant team in a big, kind of not primetime game, but a big matchup, so to speak, against undefeateds. Obviously, knocking North Carolina State out of pretty much any playoff contention, and like you said, it kind of reasserts the whole Bama Clemson storyline. I know people had been kind of down on them just with some lackluster performances.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Lawrence stepping up in terms of his quality play. We'll see if it continues going forward, but if it does, they're obviously going to be a tremendous tough out, an ACC play for sure, and then obviously the playoff.
Yeah, they look good. It'll be tough. I think it'll be a little tough to maybe gauge them correctly just because the schedule is kind of weak moving forward. But, eye test, on paper, they certainly look like a top 2 or 3 team right now. So, yeah, big win for them. NC State, definitely frauds. Get the hell out of here. LSU and Mississippi State. So, yeah, so Steele and Corey had LSU minus 6.5, easy cover. I had Mississippi State plus 7. Thanks, Nick Fitzgerald, for being terrible at life. Mississippi State actually, I think, I'd have to look it up specifically, but I think yards per play, they were right there, maybe a little bit better. They had more total yards, but their problem, third down, 2 of 14, 4 turnovers, only to LSU's 1, and Nick Fitzgerald, this is definitely a nominee for loser of the week. 8 of 24, 59 yards, 4 interceptions.
It's not Rutgers bad, but it's bad.
He might start for them, but I think that it's unfortunate for Mississippi State that they're so one-dimensional, but they're so good at running the football, and their front seven is so good that it's like a waste of a year having such bad quarterback play. And if they don't turn the ball over 4 times, maybe they have a chance in this game. But just as we saw in a lot of games this weekend, OSU, Purdue, penalties and turnovers, not being able to score in the red zone, that type of stuff, it's cliche, but it kills teams. And, this is the thing. So, like Brian from Columbus today, Brian J., we were talking about LSU, and he's much higher on them than I think this pod generally has been all year. I think we started to come around on LSU a little bit more recently. But it's hard to tell with LSU because, this is my perspective on it. They beat Miami, right, who's overrated as fuck. And then they beat Auburn, overrated. Beat Georgia and beat them handily, and that's a good win. Maybe they're a bad matchup for Georgia. Georgia's a little soft on the front seven. LSU had a good matchup with them. But at what point does LSU keep winning against ranked opponents? And do we keep saying,
Troy's averaging 14 yards per play.
Oh,
sorry.
So in the yards per play, yeah, Troy is playing South Alabama right now. They're kicking their ass. But, yeah, so I don't know. I think LSU and Bama both have a bye week this week, right? And then they play next, do they not? Or is that not the next game? So that will be at night in Baton Rouge. I believe LSU will be getting about 14 from what I saw, maybe even a little bit more. I think we're finally going to figure out what's going on with LSU.
Right.
And how do you feel about, I think I covered it against Mississippi State for the most part, but I guess I'm wondering, we'll preview, obviously, LSU Bama coming up in the next one, but was your takeaway from this game that LSU is like a dominant top 5 team, or is Mississippi State just fraudulent?
Well, I think I kind of previewed it pretty perfectly for last week's game, is kind of just looking at what Mississippi State was or is, and that's a low-scoring, defensive, fraudulent team. LSU, I think I even said the max you were going to get out of Mississippi State was 10 or 17 points.
Yeah.
They mustered 3.
Yep.
So it was a pretty easy cover for LSU, only having to put up 19.
Right.
But like you said, is LSU overrated just based off their opponents? Obviously, you're going to get the end-all, be-all test with the home game against Bama in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they win that game, they're in the driver's seat. Ooh, trickeration.
Oh, boy.
Throw it!
Trying to run Philly special.
Got it.
Yep. Everyone's running that play now. Everybody is running Philly special, and nobody stops it. Just run it every play.
But as far as playoff contention, I think LSU is a contender. Obviously out if they lose to Bama, so that's going to be a big ask for them to win as a 14-point dog against everyone's darling of Bama. But I like what they have on defense. I like what they have. They're starting to emerge a little bit in terms of offensive efficiency.
Right.
What they're getting out of Burrow. Is it Devin White? Is that his first name? Anyway, the linebacker who was ejected in the Mississippi State game, second half, is going to miss the first half of the Bama game no matter what, because that is not reviewable by anybody, which is kind of bush league. Yes. So that's a huge loss for them. But it'll be, obviously we'll preview that game for sure. Yeah. We'll preview that game for sure in a week. 100%. But as far as LSU goes, a dominant performance. Definitely on the scoreboard and obviously on third down when it counted most and winning the turnover battle.
Yeah, no doubt. We're going to find out, I think, finally kind of, what side of the fence we're going to be on with LSU. Now, I don't know. I think it's kind of unfair to say, though, like, playing Alabama is going to be really tough. Like, even if LSU hangs around in that game 14 to 21 points and they play them tough, they're going to get a lot of credit for that, and they still can have a very successful year. They've already exceeded expectations, I think, according to most people. So, they dominated Mississippi State. Mississippi State, you are atrocious at throwing the football. Last game from last week, and then we'll quickly move on. Oregon and Washington State. I gave this one out as one that I really liked the Cougs in this spot. They jumped out to a 27-0 halftime lead, I believe, or 27. Yeah, 27-7, or was it 27-7? Okay, so Oregon got a touchdown. But yeah, I think Washington State had about a yard more per play, outgained Oregon by about 70 yards. I think some of the keys in this game, and this is what's interesting, is that Washington State actually lost the turnover battle 2-0. Oregon didn't have any turnovers, but surprisingly, Washington State shut them down on the ground. Like, they did not allow Oregon to run the football. Oregon couldn't get Washington State off the field on third down. Washington State got Oregon off the field on third down. I think that we discussed this game as a bad potential spot for Oregon, but we felt like if Oregon did go in there and kick their ass, that we would feel maybe a lot more strongly about Oregon moving forward. But we did say this was somewhat of a playoff elimination game, especially, obviously for Oregon, but this potentially could have ended the Pac-12's hopes. We said with chaos, Washington State might have a chance, but they have a tough game of their own coming up, which we're about to preview them again this week. But my takeaway from the game was pretty much what I previewed. I thought Oregon was going to be a little flat. They came out way too flat in the first half. Got too far behind, did fight back to where I think Washington State fans were having some deja vu. They've given up some big leads before in games like this, but Pirate found a way to close the door.
Looky.
Pirate
still alive in the playoff picture. People call me crazy about that, but as they trickle up the standings, we'll see where the playoff committee has them here in another week if they're able to pull off the win against Stanford. But atmosphere, game day being in Pullman for the first time, obviously, had the fans riled up, and it was great atmosphere from what it appeared on game day. I actually didn't watch as many snaps of the game as I really wanted to. I was actually more glued to the Ohio State debacle, which were kind of airing simultaneously. But from what I saw, Washington State, played pretty well in the first half, both offense and defense, really. Yeah. Like you said, a little bit of a collapse there in the second half, but was able to get the W to see if they can keep the ball rolling. to Stanford. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see.
See if Pirate has a little extra magic. But
He's. I mean, they're the Pac-12's last hope. In my opinion, I think that's everybody's opinion, pretty much. So yeah. So those were the games that we. That's the recap from Week 8, I should say. Moving into our winners and losers for the week. I forgot to get some of those from the other guys, but
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead. I think we have the same loser, but
yeah, it's got to be Ohio State.
Yeah, clearly
it's got to be. You can't just be going to West Lafayette and be losing by 29 points.
Yeah,
and letting the old trains hang a 49 spot on you.
Yeah,
pretty embarrassing. Looked like the defense quit the last 2 or 3 possessions, which isn't shocking. It's just more funny to me.
Yeah.
Looked pretty pathetic on the line, getting pushed around by Purdue. Rondell Moore is legit.
Really good.
I mean, like he
really
is really
He's NFL
freaking good.
First round good.
He's like, why are you at West Lafayette, Purdue?
Yeah.
Why are you not in Tuscaloosa?
How much did Jeff Brom pay you?
Yeah. They had some Ohio State had some untimely penalties as we saw, which was pretty funny on my part. Just uncharacteristic, really, of an urban-led team.
Yeah.
Ooh, good catch.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So bad penalties, big plays, obviously, letting up on the defensive side, stuff like that. So they'd be one of my losers for the week. Another loser would be Cincinnati. Just in general.
Yeah, screw that.
Yeah. That was a bad, not a bad bet. It turned out to be a bad bet.
I mean,
but they were dominant the whole entire game and somehow ended up losing in overtime and not covering the 4 points that they were getting. Once again, one of those spots where the line just kind of reeked, but it was too good to be true, so I still took Cincinnati.
Yeah, I guess on that one, I know that like a lot of the guys that are like notorious for picking very well and pros were on Temple, it seemed like, but that was the first time this year that I saw like a stinky one, and I went the way of the stink just because I felt like I guess I felt like Cincy was just as good as Temple in getting points, if not possibly the better team. So I did take them as you did. We saw the collapse, but yeah. Did you want to elaborate on that further? I just kind of took over.
No, that was it.
Winner?
Oh, another loser, Butch Jones.
Oh yeah,
getting a Gatorade bath as a like whatever he is, assistant.
Right. Yeah.
At
like
Alabama.
Intern, yeah.
For getting a win at Tennessee, so good on you, Butch Jones. Impressive win you got there.
Yeah.
Against the players you recruited.
It's bad, man. Yeah.
Pretty embarrassing for that.
Winner?
Kentucky football.
Again?
Anybody? No.
Wait, were they on bye?
No, they won. They beat Vanderbilt.
Oh, that's right, 14-7. Yeah.
No, they can't. If they win next week, there'll be another winner.
Yeah,
but
clearly.
They didn't make winners this week. Obviously, you could look at Purdue.
Yeah, you can go on the other side of that for sure.
That's a good question.
How about, you know what? I'll get into my losers, and then we'll go with our winners.
Yeah, I'll
so
fish for a winner.
I already said Ohio State is one of them. As an Ohio State fan, it's incredible to see that team not be able to run the football, not win the point of attack on the line, be this deep into a season, and still be blowing assignments on defense, still a lot of missed tackles. And as Steele alluded to, one of the most disappointing things is a team that's just heavily penalized week in and week out. And I'll give the defense a little credit as far as they played actually pretty well in the first half. They had their splits between first half and second half for the last like 4 or 5 weeks, I think, have been it's been pretty crazy like how much better they had been in the second half. But they were playing pretty well in the first half. They were containing Purdue. They did give up the one long drive, but I thought besides that, they were playing pretty darn well. They were getting to the quarterback, making some tackles. But, it's like we said with all those stupid cliches in football, Ohio State could not score touchdowns in the red zone. I had been concerned about that all year, and that came to fruition on Saturday. They have as far as yards per carry running the ball, that's decreased each week. This is a very undisciplined and soft team right now that is in major need of a bye week. A team that I've had people asking me all week, are they still a playoff contender? And I said, well, technically, yes. I don't think they're good enough. I don't think they're going to beat Michigan, and they might even lose another game besides that. But, let's say they come out of the bye and they find themselves, and all of a sudden the O-line's firing off the ball. Are they talented enough to run the table the rest of the way? Like, what I mean is through the Big Ten championship game until they get to the playoff, then that's certainly possible. But right now, they are definitely one of the losers. My main loser of the week for sure. They're just a very glorified Big 12 team right now, and it's pretty disappointing. My other loser, I said he was a nominee. I'm going to stick with him, Nick Fitzgerald. He can run the football, but he is not a quarterback. He is atrocious at passing. He is one of the main reasons that Mississippi State could not take that next step this year and be essentially a contender in the West like we said they could have been during the SEC preseason pod. So winner for you, and then I'll go with mine after that.
Yeah, it's actually a duel. It's actually another winner, another loser.
Okay.
It's the same game.
Okay.
Winner is going to be UCF because they kept their, quote, playoff aspirations alive with a backup quarterback.
Right, yeah, Mel was out, right?
Then reverse that to ECU, who's an abysmal program. Somehow they have 2 wins. I don't even know how.
Yeah, I don't know how that's
Who
possible.
they've even beaten.
BT?
They lost to North Carolina A&T. That's embarrassing.
That's not good, yeah.
They beat UNC. Oh, they beat Old Dominion, who also beat
Virginia Tech.
Nice.
Yeah, clearly.
But to lose, be embarrassed, and not get the cover of like 22 points against the backup quarterback at home is pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So my winner is going to be Scott Frost in Nebraska football. They are back.
Okay.
They won a game. And, we've been saying it on the pod for a while now. Nebraska should actually, based on their stats, probably have like 3 wins. You could argue possibly 4. But talk about being undisciplined and a little leaky on defense. That's Nebraska. That game with OSU, there can be a good over to look at eventually later in the year. But yeah, they throttled Minnesota. They are a team moving forward that's going to be kind of interesting to try to bet. I'll be interested to see what their lines look like. But it was nice to see Frost get that win, and I think there's been a lot of pressure there, and it's a very storied program. Their fans, I think, are, I don't know, I guess I would have to see what they say these days, but I think they're probably still a little unrealistic as far as what they think Nebraska football should be. But good for them getting the win. They deserved it. They should have won already a few times this year. So that will be my winner of the week. So let's transition now into our bets, winners and losers, 1 or 2 each. If you get yours loaded up and you want to go, and then I will give Corey's and Addison's.
Yeah,
and
so my easiest winner, actually on the winning side this week.
Yeah.
I was pretty happy with that
Nice.
result.
Hell yeah, I was not.
Oklahoma,
yes.
-7 against TCU. They embarrassed them.
Yeah.
TCU's abysmal.
Yep.
Anybody from the Ohio State bubble that thought that was a quality win is fooling themselves.
Nope.
They're not good, and I don't think it's Ohio State's as good as people thought. So that was an easy win for Oklahoma. Frustrating play of UC +4 as they literally dominated pretty much the entire game until they lost.
Yep.
I guess what you could call my luckiest bet was the over in Ohio State at 69.
Yeah, that'd be like a good
Yeah,
value type of thing.
good lucky,
Yeah,
good lucky.
yeah.
With a bunch of Garbo points in the fourth quarter, that was a tremendous outcome for a push. And then finally, Missouri -9 throttled Memphis. There was like 900 points at halftime, and they did a nice easy cover for me.
Yeah,
some other people had.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So Corey had for one of his better winners, he had Michigan -7, I guess. Miami Ohio +8, LSU -6.5. I mean, those are all good ones. He had a couple bad ones. He had Tennessee plus 29. He decided
Oh,
to
Jesus.
take the Butch Jones leftovers
What?
against Butch Jones' new team.
What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of points in an SEC game, but Corey, we've been talking about this. This is not the same Alabama. They're even better than what they've been.
Their
So
backups just throttled.
yeah, so not too good. Addison, another winning week. He's really starting to. I mean, he's 9 games above 500, so that's good. I would say, wow, he hit on a lot of totals. It looks like over 62. Oklahoma TCU, that was a good one. Under LSU Mississippi State. How do we all not take that? Like, how do we not take the under in LSU Mississippi State? He had Arizona plus 10. I would say he had NC State plus 17, like we said. He had Oregon plus 3. I warned him and Corey about that. He had Sparty plus 7, so missed there, but had a winning week overall. I went 2 and 3. Like Steele alluded to, Cincy was kind of a rough beat. I did have Memphis plus 10. Felt like they could keep up in that game, but Missouri just throttled them. I would say I had Oklahoma also. Washington State, I guess, was my best one. They took it to Oregon and kind of let their foot off the pedal in the second half. But yeah, so some bets that we won and lost. I think the pod actually did pretty well last week, and I think we're starting to actually turn it around pretty good. But let's get into what is always the meat of this pod, and that's going to be our preview of the upcoming games. I believe we have 3 ranked versus ranked games this week, if I remember correctly. And we will start with what the hell do they call it? The outdoor, or the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Not anymore.
Can't call it that? That's a bunch of bullshit. Whatever. So we're going to call it that. But yeah, Florida plays Georgia. And, this is an interesting game because I believe both these teams are off a bye, if I'm not correct. Georgia coming off of the humiliating beatdown against LSU. Florida coming off of a almost collapse against Vanderbilt after they had a big win over LSU. Interesting game. It looks like the line is around 6.5 or 7 right now. From what I've seen in the metrics, that actually lines up pretty well. I guess I'll go first real quick with like how I feel kind of on the surface about this game. It's going to be interesting to see what Georgia's made up of after that LSU beatdown. Like we always talk about these teams that get their asses kicked, they get embarrassed. The only way to get rid of that taste in your mouth is that you play the next game and you throttle somebody. Florida's been much more improved throughout the year moving forward. I felt like Georgia had been starting to play a little bit worse. Maybe they were a little fraudulent. I think the main matchup I'm looking for is I'm curious to see after Georgia couldn't match LSU's physicality if they can match Florida's, because Florida, their front 7 on D is pretty nasty, and Florida is willing to run the football. What are your first thoughts about that game? If you have a lean, which way would you go? You don't have to have one if you don't want to, but we always get leans.
It'll definitely be a game I tune into for the afternoon slate.
Would we say playoff elimination game?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely with both teams playing in the East
and having a loss already.
Right, for sure. So playoff elimination game. Georgia favored by about 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
I would wait to see what the total is before I would lean probably under, depending on where that comes out at. Interested to see what Georgia does at quarterback, if they tinker with Fields in there at all.
Yeah, we talked about that.
I wouldn't recommend it being this game unless the kid is absolutely as advertised.
Yeah.
Just with how good Florida's defense has been all year. Mullen's done a really good job there, kind of stabilizing the program. I thought people thought that was a pretty good hire.
Yeah.
But didn't really anticipate, this type of production right off the bat, even though the cupboard wasn't very bare for him.
Right.
That being said, I would probably take the points with Florida, it being in Jacksonville, neutral site game. So I think you're getting a little bit of value there with the points in Florida with 2 very evenly matched teams that are going to be really, really good, and obviously, like you said, playoff elimination.
Yeah, I think I would lean Florida also. I just think that they're going to be able to run the ball in Georgia, and even though I usually like Georgia in the spot like this where they do come off like a beatdown, I just think that Florida's going to be able to do enough on the ground to stay in the game. And honestly, when I think a team can possibly win the game outright, I just think taking the points is the only possible way you should go. I think Florida can win the football game. So I do think that Florida keeps this within the number. I think it's one of those games where like maybe Georgia does win by like a field goal or something though. I think Georgia will probably eke it out. But that is going to be kind of an unknown with like the quarterback situation. Both these teams coming off a bye. What is going on this TV? Is he cramping or is
he cramped and all his teammates sort of.
Okay, like the guy's like it looks like he's having a seizure. So like yeah, so we both like Florida, which means you probably should bet Georgia, but we'll move on to the next game, the second game of the ranked versus ranked. Iowa is at Penn State. This is a 3:30 kickoff. Looks like the line is also around 6.5-point favorite for the home team, which is Penn State. This is an interesting game because Penn State has been kind of like inconsistent this year. Like it can be argued that they should be undefeated. They should have beat Michigan State. ESPN had them as like 96% win probability in the fourth quarter against Ohio State. So like they could very well be 7-0. On the flip side of that, after I dug into their game against Indiana, it actually looked like Indiana should have won that game a lot of the time. So what team am I getting here? Is Franklin, is he overrated? Like recently in the bigger games, it's been kind of a question mark with some, like some questionable coaching calls or decisions. Iowa has looked like they've been playing some pretty damn good ball recently, and it's really weird because like when I look at the metrics, they look pretty average like they usually do. So I think since Wisconsin, I know what I'm getting from Iowa, and I don't know exactly what I'm getting from Penn State. Now, the only knock against Iowa where I could see there being Penn State money is that Iowa, I believe, tends to be a lot better at Kinnick, and there are a lot of teams where they have that weird or that home and away split where they're much better at home.
Yeah.
But I know what I'm getting out of Iowa. I think that they will definitely be able to match Penn State's physicality. I think the big difference for Iowa is I think Stanley's been pretty good for them because they've actually been a little bit worse this year than what they normally are at running the ball, but they've been able to move it vertically down the field, and that helps them open it up. And it's different because they aren't like these new, the spread offenses where they're hitting these receivers. It's like with tight ends and like the normal shit that Iowa does. So I'll hand it over to you. I guess I will say real quick that I believe I would take the points with Iowa just because I think I know what I'm getting with them. I don't think I'm going to have a bet or any kind of play in this game, perhaps, but I think you actually do. You feel pretty confident.
Yeah, so I'm already booked on Iowa +5, I think it is.
Yeah.
I just think they've looked much more impressive as of late than Penn State. Penn State a little bit inconsistent, as you had stated.
Yeah.
Playoff elimination game definitely for both teams, especially for Iowa. Iowa only having one loss. I know a lot of people don't really project him as a playoff team, but if they clear this hurdle, the rest of the way they've got pretty much no competition, or at least it would appear that way.
I mean, 11-1 Big Ten champion is going to have a lot of say.
Right, and that that champion, or that championship game would most likely come over a Michigan team or an Ohio State team, which will obviously carry some weight. I'm not saying it's an automatic berth or anything like that, but definitely a game that'll have a little bit of say for the playoff going forward. So, but I'm on Iowa. I see what they're not.
They're not sexy. They are what they are.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird that you can't call them explosive, but yet they've had like such outbursts of points.
Yeah, they move it vertically.
Right.
Yeah.
They move. They're methodical. I mean, their yards per play aren't great.
Right.
Or isn't great.
Right.
But but they still put up points, and that, in my opinion, is obviously much more important. Is how many points per game you're scoring than yards per play.
Right.
So that's where I'm going to be at on this one. Pickett.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a chance to win the game. So again, it's one of those spots where if I think they can win the game, then I'm going to take the points. I don't see any glaring mismatches between, or as far as like Penn State exploiting Iowa in any aspect. I do think I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State won the game and covered. I like Iowa in this spot though. So yeah, moving on to the last game as we have a little bit of a lighter slate this week. It looks like there's some decent mid-tier games in here, but Washington State is at Stanford. And when I actually first saw the line, I was actually a little surprised. I think it's a little stinky, to be honest. I know that Stanford's ranked. I know they're still 5-2, but Stanford, for a while this year, we've said is pretty overrated. Bryce Love's been hobbled. When he's been hobbled, they haven't been as good. Washington State, like we said, though, they've been playing quite well this year. They have a couple pretty decent wins. Obviously, they're coming off of a pretty big win against Oregon. And what I'm going to be curious to see is, we've been saying this for 2 years. Is Stanford going to be efficient on offense at all? Is Bryce Love going to be healthy in this game? Washington State shut down Oregon's running game. If Washington State can make Stanford one-dimensional, yes. Is Arcega-Whiteside capable of winning a lot of one-on-one matchups? Sure. But when you make Stanford one-dimensional and when they continuously slam their running backs into 10-man fronts on first down, that's what hinders them and I think makes them inefficient. I think Shaw is just a little stubborn in that aspect, but I think you'll be a little surprised. I would lean Stanford, and I just think that it's a weird line to me. I feel like Washington State's going to be a trendy dog in this game. They're coming off an emotional win. I get if you are going to tell me in 10 seconds that you're on the Pirate, or if you lean them. I get if you guys feel like you should bet them. But I'm digging more into this game because it's weird to me. It feels like Stanford to me for some reason, and I hate Stanford this year. I hate them.
Moving back, holding.
Your take.
Looky.
Pirate again. Yeah. Like, should I go against the Pirate?
Pirate is 7-0 against the spread this year.
Yeah.
And as you said in the previous outlook for the other game was, if I have a feeling that the other team can win, I'm going to take the points.
Right, correct. And so I'm like totally contradicting myself in that spot. It's just so stinky to me.
No, I know. I don't disagree with the stink. I definitely don't disagree with the stink. And I also completely agree with the emotional home big win. Game day was at our place last week. Now we've got to go on the road and play a physical Stanford team. But honestly, Stanford doesn't impress me on the defensive side of the ball as much as they have in years past. And I think there's plays to be had in that secondary for the Washington State passing attack. So I see Minshew having a pretty big game. And like you said, I'm going to take the points with a team that has a perfect record against the spread. Perfect record against the spread and has an opportunity to win that game outright.
Yeah, I think if I didn't know as much as I know about these teams and like how lines, like what the stink means a lot of the time, I think it's like it's an auto like bet for the Pirate. But it's one of those ones where I'm just going pure, like the lean. See, that's the thing is I don't think I'll have a play just because of how stinky it is to me. But I think just based on the stink, I just go Stanford just because of that. That's the. But I get the Washington State play. So. Yeah, those are the only ranked versus ranked matchups. Like I said, there's some other mid-tier ones. You got, the ABC game is Texas at Oklahoma State. Pretty interesting game. I actually think that's a pretty good segue into, real quick, we'll give out maybe a few of our already locked-in bets for the week. You already said Iowa +5, I believe it is, trending towards 7.
Duke.
So go ahead. Duke
-2.5.
Okay.
At Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is atrocious.
Yes, they're very bad.
And I believe Duke is going to beat them.
So Addison did go Washington State +3.5. He doesn't give a shit about the stink. I tell you one that I feel actually pretty confident in is I like A&M at Mississippi State this week. They're coming off a bye. They're getting 3. They have been pretty good pretty damn good against the run this year.
Like the wheels falling off the car mentality.
Yeah, I think
Mississippi
Mississippi State has got not a whole lot to play for anymore. I think if A&M puts them in a position where Fitzgerald again has to be efficient, red zone or non-red zone, I think A&M's the only thing in this game where I could see there being a problem is Mississippi State being able to get to Kelly Mond. A&M hasn't been as good in pass pro this year, but he's been very good, way better than I thought he would be. But I like Jimbo and the boys coming off a bye. I feel pretty confident about that one. Corey going to the well once again with Virginia Tech, -3 versus Georgia Tech.
Bees.
They did get a bye week to prepare for the option.
Won't help.
No, the thing is in that game, I actually was thinking I was leaning Virginia Tech. I don't think I'm going to bet it because I guess my thoughts in that game are Virginia Tech has been really, really undisciplined as far as like stopping big plays, especially like in the run game. It looked like I think I read like their stuff rate, like they are stuffing teams, but that's because Bud's selling out to like stop plays, get the negative plays like they do.
A lot of big plays in that game.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech's going to spring a lot of big plays. The thing that Virginia Tech has going for them is Georgia Tech's been atrocious on defense, and they're giving up a lot of big plays themselves. Does our boy Kansas, Ryan Willis, is he able to hit some of these receivers, make some big plays? There's potential there. But yeah, Corey going to the well there, so we have a little VT -3. But yeah, so a little bit lighter of a slate this week. We're starting to weed out some of the pretenders. We told you guys like 2 weeks ago that not all of these teams are going 12-0. Ohio State loses badly to Purdue. We've got some teams left though that not too many undefeateds, but your boys, they've got a lot of tricky games coming up. We've got Bama playing LSU and Baton Rouge coming up. Maybe that's the shocker that we're looking for, but I think certainly we're getting into the heart of conference play. A lot of these ranked versus ranked matchups, a lot of playoff scenarios coming to fruition. So
look at this. They can't even kick a 30, 40-yard field goal.
No, they're atrocious.
Sack.
Touchdown. Pick six.
Pick six?
Pick six.
Pick six?
Pick six. They can't kick the field goal, and he's going to pick six it. Oh, he's good. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. That was close.
Great way to end the pod.
Yeah, so that's it. There shouldn't be anything else to be said.